Hello, this is Roman from the Chess Video Guide channel, and today I will cover a very important Rook endgame. There are several quite practical ideas that are contained in this very simple example. So this is a game between Reshevsky and Alekhine from 1937, and here it is Black's turn, and in this Rook endgame, Black has one passed pawn that is pretty far advanced, and White has two pawns. So it's really the question of what is stronger, the far advanced pawn that Black has on a2 or the two connected passed pawns that White has. And it turns out that here it is White who is playing for a win. So Black has to play very carefully. So the rook and the pawn are kind of sitting here, and they're just not really able to do very much. So the crucial question is, what does Black do with the king? It's deciding where the king should go that is, the most important question in this position. So on one hand, Black can head with the king to the king side. So here he could go king to e6, trying to block those two pawns that White's about to begin pushing. So let's say what happens then. Then White's going to play king to g3, unblocking the h pawn. And it turns out that in this position there's actually very little that Black can do, to stop the advance of the white pawns. Eventually, the pawn will go forward, and then the king will advance to g5, and then the h pawn will run. And this is not a very favorable position for Black. Black could easily lose here. It's probably lost. So this is kind of hopeless. There's no reason for Black to do this. Instead, what Black should do here is he should support the a pawn with the king. And let's say if White carries on. And one important thing to notice that if, say, White does something like pawn to g5, Black always has an important resource like rook to b5, and either the well, there isn't actually much of a choice for White, because once the pawns are exchanged, this is going to be a draw. So so White has to play something like king to g3. Then Black begins to attack the rook and disturb White this way. Of course, the rook has to stay on the a file, because if the rook leaves the a file, then the black pawn is going to queen. Excuse me. So rook goes to a8, and Black advances the king towards the pawn. White advances his pawn, and now White has an important choice to make. The king can go either to f4 or to f4. Sorry, to h4 or to f4. So in the game, the king went to f4. If the king had gone to h4, hiding from the horizontal checks, which we'll see later, then Black actually is on time to win the rook for the pawn, and then the king comes back and the rook comes back, and this is a drawn position, because White does have time to win the rook back, but Black will be then able to stop the h pawn with the king, and we're just going to have two kings left on the board after pawn to g8 in this current position. So back to here, instead White played king to f4. Now it's actually dangerous for Black to do the exact same thing and just try to run for the a pawn. So instead of trying to win the rook for the a pawn, here Black should do something else. He should realize that with the king on f4, this king is now subject to horizontal checks, and this is exploited by black's next move. So now what black wants to do is he wants to give a check rook to c4, and then depending on where the king goes, give another check and transfer the rook to the a file. So for example, if white just advances the pawns innocently, and then after rook to c4 gives another naive, makes another naive move, king to e5, for example, or even, it's actually kind of illogical to go to e5. But say if he goes to f5 trying to keep the pawn defended, then simply rook to c5, and the rook is transferred to the a file, and black's winning because, well, the a pawn is going to promote. So, in view of this, of course, the only thing that white can do is to start to give checks of his own. So he goes rook to b8, king to c3, the rook back, and the king is back, and we see the repetition because both sides have really, no way to make progress from here. So a seemingly innocent kind of endgame, but there are several very important ideas, and both sides' choices really involve where they go with the king. So here black has to decide where he should go with his king, and the correct answer is to transfer the king to the queen side, and support the a pawn. On the other hand, white has his own choice a bit later on, where he has to decide if the king goes to h4, further away from the center, but hiding from the horizontal checks, or the king goes to f4, in which case it is exposed to the horizontal checks. But if black goes wrong and now tries to win the rook with king to b3 and rook to b1, actually the white king here would be better placed, and the pawns will have a high chance of promoting. So here black has to really realize the difference between this position and this position, and here go for the horizontal checks. This is a classical example from the Avro tournament from 1938, and with just 7 pieces left on the board, there's a lot to be learned. A lot to be learned about the role of kings in these kind of positions. We can also learn about the importance of the pawns being far advanced, and generally, all in all, a pretty instructive rook endgame. I hope you enjoyed watching this.